Yes. Welcome in. It's Balloon Party, driven by Mung and Ass Burkhardt, Alton Toyota, 101 ESPN, and the 101 ESPN YouTube channel. My name is Tim McKernan, and if you're watching, the gentleman with the thick, luscious hair is Jackson Burkett. You know, we've always said regarding TMA, and I've got the TMA Rooster hoodie on today, ours is the type of presentation where friends feel free to drop by at any time.
That's right, Tim.
And I'm getting ready here, and I have Jackson's captain's log for today's edition of Balloon Party in front of me, because this is a well-oiled machine. And I know it might come off as improv with no preparation. And while that might be a dead-on read, Jackson still has a meticulous captain's log that features today's Thoroughfare Thursday.
Yeah, I actually write out a script every day.
And I'm reading from it on the prompter.
Yeah, and so I hand it to Tim, and, I give him some wiggle room on syllables, but every word is...
Otherwise, just to stay on the clock.
Right.
And Benji Molina just walked in.
Yeah, I like that.
And I think what he thought was somebody he knew and respected would be in the 101 ESPN studio. And then he's like, oh, who are these?
Yeah, just giving an hour back to charity. Who are these two guys?
And he pointed at the little rooster from the TMA logo on my hoodie, and he goes, I like that.
Yeah, it's a handsome rooster. It's a handsome rooster.
But I think he's like, I think I'm in the wrong studio. Who are these people?
Right, and that's a fair question to ask.
Right.
Who are
the only way to know me is to get to my basement. Because otherwise, I'm at work, I'm in my basement. I'm at work, I'm in my basement.
Yeah.
I might hit the Cracker Barrel in Fenton. I'm in my basement.
Chicken sandwich?
Chicken sandwich, grilled sourdough, if you please. Steak fries, double them up for me.
Oh, 2 orders.
Yeah, it's winter. Ladies and gentlemen, Jackson has a wonderful program prepared for you. And, I was just talking to Randy Carricker as well, who I think Benji Molina thought was going to be in here and then couldn't have been more disappointed by who was actually in here. And he said, Greg Amsinger said on the opening drive that he thinks the Cardinals are done until the trade deadline. Damn. Which is not what I think. I just don't think that.
Well, it's cost me money already.
Yeah, but you bought out of it.
Yeah.
Saved 50% on it. I just really don't. But I mean, hey, man, I think he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Hell, I don't know.
Yeah, that's, I don't know. You would think that they still have something. I mean, they need bullpen arms, but. And
I didn't get a chance to ask Randy this. Hey, who's is it Midnight Rider in there?
Yeah, Mike Rider's right there.
I can't tell.
He's wearing a beanie.
Do you call it a toque?
The Canadians do. I don't think he's listening, though. Oh,
yeah, he's like most of St. Louis. But did they talk about, I know you don't know because you were with me doing TMA, the article in the St. Louis Business Journal on Bally's /Diamond Sports? Is Midnight Rider, I feel like now he left because he just doesn't want to have to deal with this. Well, hell, I don't know.
You want me to go get Randy?
Sure.
I'll go try.
Well, what if I drop an F-bomb now?
Well,
there's no filter.
I'll take the heat.
Wow, this is a big mo. You could cost this station its license right now. I mean, I am without a net on 101 ESPN. It's just me in the 101 ESPN studio by myself. Wasn't this a movie? Wasn't this Airheads with Brendan Fraser? Am I thinking of the right picture? Well, either way, I feel like the lead today. And I know Jackson wants to preview the Blues and Sabres. I'll be there tonight. Jackson won't be watching it. He's going to act like he's going to, but I know he's not, which you can catch pregame right here on 101 ESPN at 6 p.m. I feel like the lead is this article in the St. Louis Business Journal. What did they talk about it?
I don't know.
I thought you were going to...
Well, I went out... Yeah, I'll throw it. I went to go get Randy, but he had vacated the hallway. It seemed like there was a lot of commotion.
What about the Midnight Rider?
It seems he is also vacated, and so I think...
Is there a fire in the building?
No, I don't think... I sure hope not. It is warm in here.
Yeah, I was about to say.
It's gotten warm in here. I would imagine they talked about it. I'd imagine, but I don't know. It was certainly the first question of my half and half here.
Oh, well, then let's just go right into the half and half because I don't want to step on your half and half. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Thoroughfare Thursday. Here is Jackson's first question. It's also a half and half.
Yeah, what do you make of this Bally situation that's currently going on? How do you think it'll impact the Blues and Cardinals? How soon do you think we will find a resolution to this madness?
Okay, so I don't know. As of when I was doing TMA, I hadn't seen it on STL today. And I know not everyone subscribes to the St. Louis Business Journal, but if it's in the Post-Dispatch or if it's being tweeted about by people who cover the team, or like a Ben Frederickson, Benjamin Hochman, it's people will be aware of it. But I haven't seen that yet. That doesn't mean that it hasn't been talked about. But what I'm saying is it may not be an obvious lead to the average person listening if it hasn't gotten to the Post-Dispatch or those who are active on St. Louis sports social media.
Right.
So that is why I am asking if it was discussed on the opening drive, because you have to subscribe to the St. Louis Business Journal in order to read it. To me, this is the lead. And I suppose the lead would just be, I can give it to you in the headline. Bally's may drop the Cardinals and Blues in late 2024. Big deal.
Yeah, it's a big headline.
Big deal. Big deal. Not just the Cardinals and the Blues in 2024. And you can read this on the St. Louis Business Journal's website if you are a subscriber. And because it is proprietary, I won't just read the whole thing. It's kind of like when I handle The Athletic, or, people, they charge for this stuff. And so here's the headline. Bankrupt broadcaster Bally Sports said it plans to drop regional sports broadcasts possibly in September 2024 as part of a wind down, according to reports, a move that would force two local pro franchises, the Cardinals and Blues, to find other television and streaming arrangements. The disclosure comes as parent Diamond Sports Group revealed in bankruptcy filings that its St. Louis subsidiary, Bally Sports Midwest, which broadcasts and streams the Cardinals and Blues games via television and in its app, posted a net loss of $13.8 million for the 9 months of 2023 that ended on September 30th. To give you a point of reference for comparing and why this is material, in 2022, Bally Sports Midwest reported a profit of $2.5 million. So you have approximately a $16.3 million swing from the black to the red. And that is how you arrive at, oh crap, we might be pulling the plug in St. Louis too. We've talked about the Arizona situation. We've talked about the San Diego situation. Was it Cincinnati or Cleveland?
Yeah. I feel like Detroit maybe.
Did I already say Phoenix? I don't know. Anyway, it's been all over the place with this Bally's thing. But the way that I think people thought it might go is the Cardinals were one of the more stable ones because the Cardinals are as popular as they are. But now, per the St. Louis Sports Business Journal, they may be pulling the plug in September of 2024. And so you go into two key elements of this. I think the one that probably most people think about, if you are listening to this show, odds are you watch a good amount of Cardinals and Blues games.
Yep.
And you go, well, then how am I going to watch the games? It's a great question. I don't have the answer. And then you also are most likely a fan of at least one of the teams, if not both of the teams. And then what you might not necessarily be thinking of right now, but I want to present to you, is if, and specifically to the Cardinals, approximately $60 million in annual revenue comes from that television deal. How they will broadcast is one question, but how much they will generate now from television becomes a question that impacts what they can spend on the team that you see on the field. So whereas you may say, I don't really care about their finances, Bill DeWitt's a billionaire, it doesn't matter, he needs to spend the money. And I think a number of people think that way. I personally don't. Because businesses have an obligation to run for profit, and not just because you're rich, you lose money. That's not the way a business operates. But I know that's the way that some people see these things, that is a problem. So let's say the Cardinals come up with their own network, and they are able to now bring in $30 million through television. Well, that means they used to get 60, now they're getting 30. So now they need to make up that other 30 somehow because they've lost $30 million. And to give context to that, we've been talking about the $200 million 40-man payroll target for this offseason. That counts. They're not just going to lose $60 million because they'll bring in some form of money, but the odds for the Cardinals and for all of the other teams around baseball as this regional sports network phenomenon comes to an end is that the total dollars coming in for organizations is going to lower. It will not be exclusive to the Cardinals. So then the bigger picture conversation is how does it impact Major League salaries in general? And will you have some owners, and I always use Steve Cohen as an example at the Mets, a guy who strikes me as somebody who goes, I don't really care. I've got so much money. Losing a bunch of money doesn't matter to me because I just want to win a world championship. And hey, if that's what he wants to do, it's his money, and if he wants to lose it, that's great. Most people who get to that amount of money as their net worth don't operate that way, right. Or they don't necessarily stay up there if they're operating that way. But if in his mind he's like, I just want to be the guy who brought a world championship back to Queens, and so I'll lose a couple $100 million to do it because I'll still have a couple $1 billion afterwards, and it doesn't really matter all that much, then so be it. You saw what he did with Scherzer and Verlander last year. So that is why this story strikes me as being quite important to the conversation. And I have a gentleman who listens to this show who is a television executive, not in St. Louis, but he does listen to Balloon Party. And when I saw that link from St. Louis Business Journal yesterday, I sent it to him, and this is what he wrote to me. I just don't see a way out of this, minus an Apple, Amazon, Google Play, who are so large that they can afford the loss on a deal and the heat of offering baseball on a paywall situation that will be extremely controversial for our national pastime. To give you an idea of what that would be like, if indeed that is the way that baseball is distributed at some point in the near future, possibly as soon as 2025, so after this coming season, think of the MLS package on Apple TV. Now, I loved it. But I'm also comfortable with streaming and accessing things on Apple TV. You know, if you're in your 60s, 70s, 80s, and you're used to just clicking on your cable and it's not there anymore, what about that? And then if you don't have a job where your obligation is to watch games and talk about them, are you going to be up for spending what it is to watch Cardinals games? And so then that gets into this question. And I said, the fact that it hit St. Louis shows this thing might be in a death spiral. And he said, God, yes. The loss on sub fees alone is in the range of $200 million per year. Ooh. Ad revenue is between 5 to 10% of RSN revenue. It's almost a rounding error versus the sub fees. And he said an option is an all-access Cardinal station for $100 per month. I think he meant $100 per year because the MLS package on Apple was like $80 for the year.
I think it was a little bit more, but it was certainly not anywhere near $100 a month.
Right. I thought it was more too. But either way, $100 per month, you're talking about $600, and that's going to rule out a hell of a lot of people. But let's just say it's $100 for the year. And he said, let's say you might get 200,000 subscribers, put a game on weekly over the air on KPLR and maybe a pay-per-view game for, say, $20. You'd make a ton of cash, but the Cardinals would quickly become a niche product and lose virtually all of the casual fans. So for those of you who are a hardcore Cardinal fan, you go, okay, I don't need to deal with Bally's anymore and whether or not the app works and closing out windows. It's worth it to me, $100. And maybe I won't subscribe to cable anymore because of that. That's worth it to me. Fine. I would imagine, again, if you're listening to 101 ESPN, it may very well be worth it to you. But the Cardinals did not become the Cardinals because of hardcore baseball fans. The Cardinals became the Cardinals in part because of KMOX and its regional reach in the early part of the 20th century. And then in addition to that, the fact that a Cardinal game is like a social event in St. Louis, as opposed to, say, hey, if you lived in Miami, want to go to the Marlins game? People look at you like you're crazy. Yep. It's a different deal in St. Louis, but that's because of the casual fans. That's what he's talking about with a niche product. And I said, so what's their best play? And he said, buy time and sell the challenge of the business model and set up for a full-blown big change in 2025. He said, I'm curious to see if any MLB teams truly tighten their belts or they just whistle by the graveyard. And I said, I'm surprised the Cardinals aren't talking about it more. And he said, my guess is lawyers are telling them to keep mum. Let's see how the free agent classes go. Maybe a lot of quality guys on minor league deals. So with that, there you go. That to me is the lead, because this impacts the Cardinals and the Blues. It impacts all of you listening, I would say, all of you listening, because you're likely Cardinals or Blues fans, and how you watch the teams. And then it impacts how the teams go about doing their business. Chris Zimmerman is also quoted in the article, the Blues CEO, and he said he is watching the situation closely, and he said that includes Major League Soccer's deal with Apple TV, with Zimmerman calling it, quote, the new model. 4 of the 5 other Bally Sports entities that reported financial data in the bankruptcy filing posted net losses in the first 9 months of the year. Those handle sports broadcasts for teams in Cincinnati, Kansas City, L.A., and San Diego. Only the entity in Florida, which handles broadcasts for the Marlins, Magic, and Panthers, reported a profit. And by the way, that's shocking to me.
I was about to say.
I mean, my God, unless their expenses are so damn low that it's like, well, we couldn't help but profit. But holy crap. I mean, you give me a choice between those cities and then having the Marlins and Magic and Florida Panthers. But, you know.
Second in the East for the Magic.
Maybe that's the
I love
reason.
Bunkero, man.
Maybe that's the reasoning. So there it is. Your thoughts on that topic. 314-399-9646. Just in general, I like to poll the audience, Jackson. Mm-hmm. And this would be in the text inbox and then in the YouTube chat. Are you watching more Cardinals and Blues than you were in, let's say, 2019? 2019 is not a good one to use because the Cardinals had a run into the NLCS and the Blues had their run for the Cup. Let's say 2018. That's 5 years. Are you watching more Cardinals and Blues in 2018 than you are now? Less or about the same amount? And think about it through you just back in 2018, you could go to Fox Sports Midwest.
Yeah.
Now it's a different deal. Your thoughts, 314-399-9646. You can just type in more, less, same, whether you be in the YouTube chat or in our Air Comfort Service text line at 314-399-9646. Tim McKernan, Jackson Burkett with you. More of the Thursday Thoroughfare. This is Balloon Party on 101 ESPN. Yeah, welcome back. Jackson and I were a little delayed there because Dan Orlovsky is paying tribute to Daniel Day-Lewis in the name of the Father with the performance. This guy is really worked up about the question that is criticism of Josh Allen unfair. And I can understand how that would get anybody to the point that they are kneeling on the ground of the set and screaming at their three co-hosts.
That's what he was doing. If you're watching on YouTube, he got low in the stance and started, the hand motion like you're really conveying something.
Now he's standing at the set and pointing at the table like Queen Latifah in the Ladies First video. And I imagine that's a reference that about 94% of the audience gets. Welcome back to Balloon Party. It's driven by Mungan Burkhardt, Alton Toyota. My name is Tim McKernan. That's Jackson Burkett. I posed the query to those of you in the audience. Just a simple one, Jackson. More or less, or the same. Are you watching more or less Cardinals and Blues than you were in 2018? And I would say we are probably in the 90% less category as I was scrolled through the Air Comfort Service text line, and that stands to reason. People chose to elaborate as their reasoning, which I appreciated, and that is a lot of people are YouTube TV customers. I'm a YouTube TV customer, but then I also pay for Spectrum, and if you have YouTube TV, you can't get it.
Yep.
So it's pretty
damn
sweet.
near everything else.
It's something else. And then people just talking about the teams not being very good, so it's not worth it to them to deal with it. Yeah. Or people also saying they just found that through COVID and when it was shut down that they didn't miss it as much, and so then they don't go out of their ways to pay for additional services that they otherwise wouldn't get. Now, if you are a Spectrum customer and you're 100% cable, this stuff has not affected you. I don't think outside of that Spectrum chaos.
But that was just with ESPN and Disney channels.
Right. So you have been pretty safe. But this is all going down.
Oh, yeah.
And it's one of those things that I guess, it's certainly not as big. Nationally it might be bigger. Locally, it's not as big as the Rams moving. But I just remember starting in 2012 on TMA and then 13 and then 14 and 15. A week didn't go by that we didn't talk about the Rams moving. And the reason wasn't because it was a pleasant topic. It's an effing awful topic. Still is. But, I felt an ethical obligation if I'm hosting a show in St. Louis and an NFL team is going to move, and it would be the second one in my lifetime. I don't know what can supersede that with relation to importance in sports news. And so you got covered. You got to talk about it. It might not be pleasant. People might not like to hear it because you don't want to hear about something that is a negative. But, I am not running for office. A lot of people want me to.
Right, not yet.
A lot of people want me to. But I'm not. So therefore, I'm going to tell you what is going on and what I think of it. And so, it's just an inconvenient fact that a week before the vote in Houston, I was on the phone with Kevin Demoff at 11 o'clock at night. He's in New York. I'm in St. Louis in my chambers, a place you've spent many a night, Jackson. Mm-hmm. At this point, my wife was there, and that was awkward because we were usually not in the same room.
Yeah. Well, she got over it.
Right. And I got off the phone and I go, son of a bitch, it's going to be the Rams and Chargers. Now, how did I come to that conclusion when the vote hadn't taken place yet? So along those same lines, right now you go, I don't know. I'll be able to flip on the TV tonight and watch the Blues and Buffalo Sabres. And when opening day rolls around and Dylan Cease takes the ball.
Like that.
Thanks. I'll be able to watch the Cardinals. And that's fine. That's like talking about the Rams in 2014. But hey, if the storm is on the horizon, just because it hasn't started to rain here yet doesn't mean we don't have a problem. And we have a problem. A hockey compadre of mine who worked on TMA, the non-ling, texted me. And from the hockey fan perspective, he wrote, the CBA expires in 2026. I recall the NHL not only having to institute a salary cap, but also they had to roll back current salaries by a large percentage. Is this TV situation how MLB gets to a salary cap? And I said, that's a legit question because you might have a real spot with salaries if the TV world blows up as it looks like it's going to. And he said there is so much long-term money that's committed to top players. If the TV bottom falls out, it's going to be a mess. And that's exactly right. So then, if one wants to localize the story with what the news has been over the last 8 days in St. Louis, you go, alas. You see what I just did right there? I put up my tiny little my fingers are so small you might not be able to see them.
Yeah, boy.
Isn't it alarming? Watch this. Alas.
Surprised you can change the channel with that thing.
I can't. CBC guy comes over and does it. I said, maybe that's why the Cardinals aren't handing out long-term contracts in the 2023 offseason. And maybe they're being responsible, not just because they're signing players who will be 50 in 4 years, but because they don't want to be obligated to long-term contracts when this landscape is so uncertain. Your thoughts, 314-399-9646. It's also welcome in the YouTube chat. My name is Tim McKernan. That's Jackson Burkett. We will pivot to the final 5 questions of the Little Piddles Thursday Thoroughfare.
Indeed, indeed.
In the second half of the program, this is Balloon Party on 101 ESPN.
This is Action Jackson with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Blues will take on the Buffalo Sabres tonight. You can catch that game right here on 101 ESPN, the home of the Blues. Pre-game starts at 6 p.m. and the puck will drop at 7 p.m. And last night in the NBA, the Pelicans defeat the 76ers 124-114. Zion Williamson with 33 points. That was another Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Second half of Balloon Party, 101 ESPN and the 101 ESPN YouTube channel. Very active in there. Good to see Tommy Summers talking it over. Good question, too. How alarming would it be to walk into the restroom at Enterprise Center and see a guy with a hole saw and sander putting work on the stall divider? Thanks, Tom Summers.
The word I would use for that is excitement.
Yeah, I agree. It'd be fun if I went in. You know, my 6-year-old has the prostate of a 98-year-old, and he goes to the restroom when we go to a Blues game. Over-under is 3.5 times because I tell him the games are only 2 periods during the week.
Which they are.
That's correct. And that way I can bolt like the wind. He's got school in the morning. Mm-hmm. I've got to entertain millions on HD2, and so that's why we have that 2-period plan. But even in those 2 periods, I'll set the over-under tonight for you, Jackson. 3.5, how many visits I go to the restroom for the Blues and the Sabres. And not for me, by the way. My prostate, wonderful. Mm-hmm. As you know.
Right, well aware.
But my sons, my God, what is going on? I go, boy, we just were in there. And I'm like, okay, Blues are on a power play. It's a good time to go.
No doubt.
Jackson, what do we have here on the second half of Balloon Party with this half-and-half thoroughfare device?
That's a perfect way of describing it. And I also have to say that I wish I could be like, oh, man, that's crazy. But I am like your son. My prostate is active. As I saw Napoleon in the long weekend we had.
Good or bad?
Bad.
Oh, no!
Oh, a lot. 2.5 hours. I think I peed 3 times.
Really?
Yeah.
You see it with a lady friend?
Mm-mm. No.
I'm going to call.
I didn't.
Doesn't matter. I already called.
Tomorrow might be a different. Tomorrow might be a different story. Who knows? Looking.
Whoa! You're going to go see it again?
God, no! I would never. Unless they released a 4-hour cut, then I'll see it again. But
so you hated the movie, but you'd like them to add 90 minutes to it.
It felt incomplete.
Okay.
And Ridley Scott is known for second cuts. See Blade Runner.
How tall they have Joaquin Phoenix?
He's shorter than most of the people, but not by like a crazy amount. I'm not like a huge Joaquin Phoenix guy.
And why is that?
I think he like gets heralded as like this great actor, and I don't think he's all that great.
Watch this. June.
He's great in Walk the Line, and he's great in The Master. Outside of that, I'm not all too high on him.
What about Parenthood?
Will Young, like, he was a child actor at the time, so it's kind of tough.
Masturbating like a madman, though.
Yeah, he's great in 8mm. Watch that one with your significant other this weekend.
Nice.
Tell me how you think of it. Looking from a narrow perspective on the college football playoff. I hear often when CFP scenarios get discussed that Georgia is always attached to their current win streak, which is, I believe, 29 games, and that they are the 2-time defending national champions. Do you think it's right that Georgia gets that on their resume, or is this an example of the bias that goes along with the CFP selection committee?
Well, I would say it would be wrong because the team that won 17 of those games is different now. So that is a fun fact. But what you have now at this particular moment, and it really kind of, I don't know, I guess bothers me is probably too strong of a term. But it's certainly disingenuous, is that I feel like depending on which school or conference you cover or talk about, you become like a lobbyist for them.
Yeah.
What the hell is that about?
I
haven't listened to Danny Cannell. I don't get a chance to as much as I'd like to. He used to quarterback Florida State. But my guess is he's real high on, and I get he went to Florida State, but he's real high on Florida State and probably saying the SEC is overrated. Paul Feinbaum is all over Alabama getting in if they beat Georgia and is adamant about it. And I got to tell you, and maybe that's the case. Maybe it is the case. But when you look at Alabama this year, if Alabama had the name Missouri, I don't think people would be like, boy, look how great this Alabama team is.
Right.
But because it's Alabama, they have some tight wins against some crap teams.
The
Arkansas is one that people probably forgot or didn't even know happened. That was homecoming in Tuscaloosa.
Yep.
Everybody knows about what happened on 4th and 31 5 days ago in Auburn. But you had the USF thing where they were fighting for their lives against USF the week after losing by 10 at home to Texas. That game against LSU, the night of Missouri-Georgia, Jaden Daniels had that team in position to win. He gets hurt, and Alabama pulls away. So I could absolutely see Alabama beating Georgia, by the way. The only game I look at and I go, there's no chance, is Iowa beating Michigan.
Yeah.
But with that established, I just don't think that this is the Alabama team that most think of, at least based on their resume. That's what I'm saying. Now, they beat Ole Miss by a couple of touchdowns, and they beat LSU by a couple of touchdowns, but it's important to contextualize that properly by saying the Heisman Trophy winner, at least the guy who absolutely should be the Heisman Trophy winner, was hurt when the game was tied and didn't come back. So I just think that that's part of this disingenuous element of the conversation, that people have decisions in their minds that are rooted in biases. And then oftentimes broadcasters or writers are like doing the work of the conferences, and it's such a strange thing.
Well, you and I have talked about how social media around college football has felt like politics in a way, where if your team gets disrespected, so it would make sense that hand in hand, people covering it would treat it almost like politics, where there is like lobbying going on. And
yeah, but if you're working for a political campaign, at least you're getting money. What are you getting? I guess likes.
Yeah, I don't
likes.
I don't see, like, I get, like, from a Feinbaum perspective, because he works for SEC Network, and like I could see that by chance. But even then, it's the SEC. Like, it is going to be okay whether Georgia and Alabama get in both or not, if one goes or the other. The
new talking point, and I don't like to call it a talking point because obviously that has a negative connotation, but I hadn't heard this until Tuesday night with Kirk Herbstreit. And by the way, I agree with him, is that you can't tell me, even if Georgia loses to Alabama, that they're not one of the 4 best teams in the country. Because barring Georgia, Michigan, Florida State, and Washington all winning, you are going to have a 1-loss team in that Final Four.
Right.
And it's highly unlikely that you have 4 undefeated teams, or even, or I should say, you won't have an undefeated team in there. In other words, there's going to be a 1-loss team paired with an undefeated team. And I say that because I just don't see Michigan losing to Iowa. But for the record, I'll be pulling for Iowa just for my amusement. So with that said, then you're going to have to evaluate a 1-loss team against other 1-loss teams.
Yeah.
And of all of those 1-loss teams, only 2 will have played each other heads up.
Yeah.
Or 2 matchups, I should say, with Texas, Alabama, and Oregon and Washington. And so it then becomes like you already know, based on who you are reading or who you are watching or listening to, where they're going to side.
Yep.
And I got to tell you, I think Herbstreit does a really good job on that. I guess people know he went to Ohio State. I mean, it's been 30 years since he played there. But I think he does a really good job. And I think if he thinks Ohio State's worthy, he says it. But if he doesn't, he says it. Like, for example, Desmond Howard took a picture with Charles Woodson on the field, pumping their fists. And, hey, he has every right to do it. But you can't go, well, I guess Desmond Howard really gave his real feelings on the Harbaugh scandal or the Michigan-Ohio State game. That's a little different program, and I think Herbstreit does a good job of that. I think Ohio State may be one of the 4 best teams in the country. I really do, and it's just like they lost at the wrong time. But they may have lost to the best team in the country.
Maybe, yeah.
So it's one of those things where, in a way, so much of this whole thing, if you are going to put teams based on where they are with being undefeated versus 1 loss / 2 losses, it's kind of a luck of the draw on the schedule.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, could Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin have gone into the year with knowing they had trips to Athens and Tuscaloosa going, this is our year? I mean, you know you are in a tough spot. You better win all 10 of the other games, and they wound up playing another team that'll be in New Year's Six, likely anyway, in Tulane in New Orleans. Now, I know you don't look at a Tulane schedule and go, God, but it turns out. And then you also probably going to have to win in Athens or in Tuscaloosa. That's the hand that you're dealt with the schedule. So it's just something to keep an eye on. And Georgia's schedule next year is brutal, and Alabama's is even worse.
Yeah, no doubt. And I heard the executive director. I've heard audio where it's the language they're using is the four.
Boo Weekly.
Boo Corkin, I believe is the gentleman's name. They're using the language of the four best, not the four most deserving.
Right.
And so,
if that is indeed the case, then I understand it. I do understand it, but they got to be more outspoken about that.
Right.
Because if that's the case, then it just strikes me. It's like, God, what else could Florida State have done?
No, you're not wrong. But
and it's not like I'm a Florida State fan.
No, but imagine you take any of the teams that are still kind of in the mix for the college football playoff, and you gave them Florida State's schedule. Do you think all of them are undefeated just like Florida State? Maybe outside of Texas.
Oh, I don't know. I think Texas is a hell of a foot. I mean, Texas is a drive from Dylan Gabriel of Oklahoma away from being undefeated themselves.
Right.
Texas, like Washington, has had some near-death experiences. And that's along with a couple of Floridas, and then Florida has the injury. Florida State, I'm sorry. So that I think people, but if you think about national champions in college football, there's usually a constant, and that is they don't just win. They'll have one near death that you go, oh my God, like Nebraska '97, flea kicker Missouri, but the other 10 or 11 weeks they are pounding teams, whether they be top 25 teams or the blood donors. And that's why people have a raised eyebrow toward Washington in particular, to a lesser extent Texas, but I think that's the byproduct of them just beating the hell out of Texas Tech recently, so there's some recency bias. And also to an extent Florida State, which kind of fooled around with Pitt for a while and had a near-death experience earlier in the year with Clemson, but more so because of Jordan Travis's situation. And that's why I'm like, hey, Alabama's had a lot of near-death experiences this year, and I know it's Nick Saban still, but for whatever reason, we're just kind of going, wow, 4th and 31. You know, 4th and 31, 0.1% of the time happens. It happened to happen.
Yeah.
But Alabama hasn't been a dominating football team. For the record, I still say I think they could beat Georgia on Saturday.
Right.
But if your mind on how to judge a college football team is by how they beat the hell out of teams, that's why I think schools that have had some near-death experiences get treated with skepticism. And also I think there is an appetite to see the semifinals not have the blowouts that it has historically, and the thought process is if Georgia plays Florida State, it's almost like a bye. Your thoughts, 1047 in St. Louis. Clarkson Jewelers time check. You can text in 314-399-9646, Air Comfort Service text line, and you are also welcome to participate in our YouTube chat. We have a sportscaster really unhappy with another sportscaster, and I want to play that for the audience and get your thoughts. That's coming up next here on Balloon Party 101 ESPN. Welcome back. Final segment of Balloon Party for Thursday, November 30th, 2023. Tim McKernan, Jackson Burkett with you, BK and Ferrario. Coming up here in about 7 minutes. I just want to say, I realize this show is really about Dan Orlovsky and our fandom. But Jackson makes the observation on ESPN that everybody wears a suit with Jordans. And on the left television in the 101 ESPN studio, I was observing that, and I go, how come he's not with Molly Querim and Stephen A. Smith? Because he was on the floor complaining about something. And then there's a television on the right side here in the studio, and I go, son of a bitch, Orlovsky's over there at the same time arguing with Stephen A. Smith and Molly Querim. That's how good the guy is.
Yeah, he can be in two places at once.
He's omnipresent.
Yeah, giving multiple takes, possibly on different sides of the same take.
That's exactly right. Man. You can talk about the era of Jack Buck and Harry Carey, but I'm going to talk about the era of Stephen A. Smith and Dan Orlovsky, and I'll debate you.
I'm Orlovsky raised.
Speaking of sportscasters, here is Mad Dog, and he is not happy with one particular sportscaster who a lot of people on social media like. Here it is. Take a listen.
Gus Johnson, the hype machine that he is, please, when you broadcast the ball game, I don't need to hear about Maserati Marvin, number one. And number two, that's not the greatest rivalry in sports history. Have you heard of the Yankees and the Red Sox, Giants and the Dodgers? How about Bears Packers? Have you heard about that? For crying out loud, don't put Michigan and Ohio State. It's not even better than North Carolina Duke, who play twice a year. So let's be careful with the hype machine. That bothered the hell out of me.
Chris, they're playing once a year, both undefeated, with 100,000 people in the building.
That rivalry's not Yankees-Red Sox. Sorry. It's not Yankees-Red Sox.
They play 100 times a year. They play 1,000 times a year. You said it yourself. Enough already.
And that's not Yankees-Red Sox. Sorry. To compare Michigan or Ohio State college football to Yankees and the Red Sox is I'm not buying.
There it is. So what we wound up when we played this on TMA, we wound up debating rivalries and rankings. I mean, the reality is if you're in the Northeast, college football isn't that big of a deal. And my analogy was if I went down to Birmingham and said, hey, you guys remember when the Blues won the Cup in 2019? They all look at me like, what in the hell are you talking about?
Right.
But his criticism of Gus Johnson, I got to tell you, I've had Gus Johnson on the show I did with Jim Edmonds. Couldn't be nicer. But as far as the style goes, I'm not real big into the Fox Big Ten thing that they got going.
Oh, big noon kickoff?
The studio dais.
That's
with Urban Meyer, Brady Quinn, Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart.
Mark Ingram pops up in there.
I mean, I'm not an investor in Fox, but if I were, I'd say, hey, quarterly profits were down. Maybe we can subtract a couple of people from the big noon kickoff set. In addition, I think the Gus Johnson yelling was organic 20 years ago because he was calling NCAA tournament games that had ridiculous endings, and then it became his thing, and then he just started yelling for a 2nd and 7 conversion. But social media loves it, and so it's become a thing that you love Gus Johnson. When there is, and I was watching the Ohio State-Michigan game, and so help me, before I would switch back and forth to switch over to the Ohio State-Michigan game, I'd have the 4-box going on YouTube TV,
the quad box,
which is the bee's knees, brother. And I go, okay, I'm going to click on it, but I'm going to lower the volume because unless it's a commercial, there's a good chance that Gus Johnson's yelling about a pedestrian play.
Down the sideline.
My guess is you like Gus Johnson. By the way, I like him as a guy.
Sure.
I don't like the yelling thing. To me, it's like Carrot Top with props. All due respect to prop comics. All due respect.
No doubt. And before I give my
anybody
opinion,
can yell.
Yeah, no doubt. Before my opinion, I believe social media consensus has actually flipped on Gus. I think.
No way.
I think more people would actually be critical of his calls.
Really?
Yeah. Yep. I think that social media consensus. The
When
Maserati
somebody
Marvin
gets popularity, they become the enemy of social media.
Bingo.
Interesting. Good point. I should have known that.
That he rose at one point. Now
we got to take him down. Now we got to take him down.
I like Gus
My
Johnson.
brother actually met Gus Johnson, and his wife said he was very rude. Oh, retweet. F off.
Yeah.
F the F off.
Yeah.
So you don't like?
I do. I like distinctive style like that. and his is so uniquely
How about I
his.
yell throughout balloon party?
And the yelling part is my favorite. But like when I just said that down the side, like I like that kind of flavor he puts into it. I don't know, it's distinctive. When you hear him, it's not like, oh, who? You know, it's Gus Johnson. And so I kind of like, I'm also a big fan of Bill Walton calling games, and I know he is far from people's favorite. So I have like some niches. Niches? Niches?
Nurse? I think it's nurse.
I have some nurse.
Correct. All right, fair enough. Yeah, but Mad Dog with the rivalry thing, I agree with the gentleman who was very worked up about it, saying that the Yankees and Red Sox play 100 times. That didn't work, and so then he increased it to the Yankees and Red Sox play 1,000 times a year. I like that debate style.
Yeah.
Make one thing up and then 10x it.
Yeah.
But if you gave me just like straight up Ohio State, Michigan versus straight up Yankees, Red Sox, I would take Ohio State, Michigan. But there was a time in the early 2000s when those two teams played in the playoffs all the time. Not all the time, but often 3 of 5 or 6 years in the ALCS. And they had some signature moments in 2003 with Boone's home run, in 2004 with Dave Roberts' steal, and then the comeback from down 3-0, which then the Cardinals felt in the World Series. That at that time, and also the offseason spending and competing for players like Alex Rodriguez, that was absolutely a monster. So it's also, both teams have to be good at the same time. And I also made the observation that if Missouri and Kansas were good at football like they were for that one brief moment in 2007, and we're still in the same conference, it would be up there with the best rivalries in all of sports, because that is actually rooted in the Civil War. I mean, that is what that's about. That's what those team names are about.
Yep.
That's what the Red Sox, that the
border war.
I mean, that's a real thing with real hatred, in particular on the west side of Missouri and the eastern side of Kansas. But, you know, since one of them or both of them is usually a bucket of crap, and now they're not in the same conference, it doesn't have the same thing. I think Auburn, Alabama is one I think of. I'm sure you're Duke, North Carolina.
Yep.
But Ohio State, Michigan, certainly live. All right, Jackson, I think it's Blues and Buffalo Sabres, and you're going to get to hear it tonight here on 101 ESPN. Pregame at 6 p.m. BK and Ferrario up next for Jackson Burkett. I'm Tim McKernan. This has been Balloon Party, driven by Mug and S. Burkhardt, Alton Toyota on